Hey everyone, Summer here, and today we're gonna talk about Guild Wars 2's balancing. Not specific numbers, not patch day spreadsheets. I want to talk about the relationship between numbers, the comparative part of DPS tuning that determines how different builds stack up against each other, especially in PvE, because honestly, something feels off. Not broken beyond repair, but off in a way that affects how players perceive DPS builds, boon DPS builds, and everything in between. And I think it's really important that the balance team sees this too, or at least considers the framework I'm going to lay out today. Also, quick shout out to everyone supporting the channel. You truly help me keep the lights on. Thank you very much. Alright, let's jump straight in. Today I want to walk you through what I consider the 4 pillars of good DPS balance. When I explain the first one, the rest will fall into place pretty naturally. So let's get right into it. So, the first pillar. Utility versus pure damage. In my ideal world, a properly balanced game always makes room for the classic, straightforward, unapologetic class cannon DPS build. You know the type, the build that exists only for one reason: deal damage. Literally nothing else. No CC. No crowd control, no group utility, no reflects, maybe not even proper cleave, just raw DPS, single target laser. And on the opposite end of the line spectrum, you'd have builds loaded with utility, strong baseline CC, projectile hate, cleave or AoE, a flexible utility skill bar, invulnerability in the kit, or other encounter helping tools. In a healthy system, these shouldn't be two separate categories. They should exist on a smooth spectrum. More utility means less damage, less utility means more damage. Pretty simple. For example, say a pure class cannon hits at 100% of a tuning target. A heavily utility-oriented DPS maybe hits 75 to 80%. Why? Because you need a reason to bring a selfish DPS when an encounter doesn't require extra tools. And you need a reason to bring utility DPS when the fight actually demands mechanics. Guild Wars 2 has improved here over the years. It's not perfect, but I think it's better. We're still seeing cases where some specs swap in utility with barely any DPS loss, while others completely tank their numbers if the rotation gets nudged even slightly. That shouldn't happen. Utility should always have a cost. Glass cannon should always have a reward. That's pillar number 1, and it's foundational. Now it gets interesting. Let's move on to the second one. The second pillar is something I've talked about a lot on my channel: how demanding a build is to play. I'm not talking about theoretical benchmarks where some classes magically hit 50k on a golem, but nobody will ever hit that in a real fight. I'm talking about the execution difficulty. Builds with tight punishing, strict rotations versus builds that are super forgiving. Some builds require near perfect timing to hit their potential. If you delay one skill because a mechanic happens or your group gets messy, your entire rotation collapses. Other builds just don't care. They can maintain solid damage even in chaos because the rotation is simple or even partially automated. Here's my take. Hard builds should reward perfect execution with higher potential DPS. Easy builds should be consistent, accessible, and forgiving, but not top of the charts. These two pillars are separate from each other. A build can be hard and also have low utility. A build can be easy and also have less utility. We evaluate each pillar individually. Guild Wars 2 honestly does this pretty well, but I think it could lean into this philosophy even more. My low intensity builds playlist exists exactly because this is important. There should be accessible builds for new players, casual players, people with disabilities, so anyone who simply doesn't want to sweat over a super strict rotation. Those builds deserve respectable DPS. They don't need to reach world record benchmarks. That's okay, but they should never be irrelevant. Meanwhile, builds that demand high execution should offer higher peak DPS when played well. To me, that's healthy design. Alright, that's pillar 2. Let's get into pillar 3, which people often misunderstand. This one gets confused with power versus condition damage way too often, but they are not the same discussion. Pillar 3 is simple. Range builds have an inherent advantage. If you can deal full DPS at 900 to 1200 range, you can hit bosses that are moving. Keep the uptime even if you must dodge out of attacks. Stay safe during certain mechanics. Maintain damage during forced spreads. Reposition without losing everything. Melee builds cannot do that. If you're melee locked, you have to be in the boss's hitbox 24/7. If the boss moves, if a mechanic blasts the stack, if you need to kite something for a few seconds, your damage drops. So logically, a melee build that manages to stay in melee 100% of the time should deal more damage than a ranged build. But that's often not what happens. Condition Virtuoso, Rifle Mech, Scourge. Just 3 examples of builds that sit at range and still put up extremely competitive numbers, often higher than melee builds, and that's before even considering pillars 1 and 2. Just looking at the range advantage alone, these builds are overtuned. I'm fully aware that in Guild Wars 2 we generally stack together heals, boons, encourage it, for sure, but fights are chaotic. There are always mechanics. Ranged builds simply have less downtime because they can keep attacking during movement. So yes, if you can deal full damage at range, your final benchmark should be lower. This isn't just a PvE thing either, it applies to competitive modes too, but that's another discussion for another time. If you want a dedicated competitive mode balance video, let me know in the comments down below. For now, on to the final pillar, the most technical one. Okay, one last pillar, the damage profile. This is the one people tend to overlook completely, but it matters a lot. 2 builds can have the same final DPS benchmark, say 45k or something, but reach that number in completely different ways. Let's imagine a build A with massive bursts in the 5 to 10 seconds window, spikes to 80k early on, then drops down over time, ends around 45k. Here you'd think about something like a power scrapper or power soul beast, something in that regard. The build B would be a very smooth, linear damage profile, barely any burst, just steady hits, which also ends at 45k. Imagine a Rifle Mech or like a power Paragon. I know that Rifle Mech doesn't reach 45k, just an example here. Now compare them in actual content, in fractals, in short fights, in easy encounters, or in phases that end quickly. The bursty build destroys the sustained one, even if their 3-minute benchmarks are identical. You kill something before the sustained build even ramps up, or a boss phases after 12 seconds, or your group's DPS pushes a breakbar instantly. So yes, a burst heavy damage profile should be considered part of a build's power budget. If your burst is incredible, your sustained DPS should be tuned lower to compensate. That way, burst builds shine where burst is needed. Sustained builds shine in long fights. Players make strategic choices based on encounter type. This creates a healthy diversity. Right now, Guild Wars 2 doesn't adjust damage profiles enough, in my opinion. Many burst builds are simply strong everywhere, while sustained builds struggle to find their niche in most situations. That's something I'd love to see improved. So those are the 4 pillars I believe Guild Wars 2 should keep in mind for good DPS balance. Utility versus glass cannon spectrum. Easy versus difficult execution. Ranged versus melee advantage. Burst versus sustained damage profile. Each of these should influence tuning. Each deserve its own weight in the balancing process. And of course you can mix and match those pillars. They are interacting with each other. It's not that one pillar has to be looked at in a vacuum. All of them can be mixed and matched so that you have some pillars that interact with each other and the build can be having utility in melee range while having a bursty damage profile. So that can interact with each other and you have to have a balancing considering all of them at once. I know that is not an easy task, but I think that needs to be done. And honestly, some pillars are handled better than others right now, but that's just my take. I'd love to hear yours too. Do you agree with these pillars? Do you think the balance team considers them enough? Where do you think Guild Wars 2 is solid? And where does it fall short? Let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like, and if you want more discussions like this, make sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.